Hi there. If you're watching this video, you must be having a very difficult time right now. And I want to see if I can offer you some words of encouragement and support. I have made a previous video that you might want to check out here as well about the silver lining and ways to cope with disillusionment with life or feeling like there's no fight left in you. But this one, I want specifically to focus on just the sense and this feeling of, I don't want to be here anymore. On this planet, it's too much, it's too hard. And I talk with people every day, and people are going through so many tragic situations that feel, like a catch-22, like, how can I manage this? How can I cope? And if you're feeling like you don't want to be here, it's not your fault. Usually the reason this is happening is because the amount that you're dealing with feels larger than your ability to cope. So know that there are a lot of ways you can increase your coping skills. There are exercises you can do to calm the nervous system down and to increase your capacity to be with a great deal of pain. I'm going to put a playlist here of several exercises you can do. And we also want to see if we can frame some of this suffering in helpful ways. So I also have videos about expanding one's self-concept in order to better frame difficult life challenges. I'll put that link here. And there are other videos about how, if I can think of the fact that I'm able to withstand a great deal of pain in order to know myself, I have that video here, that can often keep me going. So I asked a teacher of mine who's in his 80s, I asked him, what is he living for? I was very curious. And he gave me a great answer. He said, I'm living to know who I am. He said, I'm not living for all the other things people think that they need to have in order to want to live. I'm not living for my family or love. Obviously, those are very important to him. But as far as the purpose, the meaning, it's to know himself. And the reason I want to share this with you, it's going to apply to anybody, every single person on the planet. This applies to you if it resonates. Your being here is not dependent on any sort of contingency. It's not dependent on if you have this or if you don't have that. And I fully understand that there are circumstances that are so difficult to manage, so tragic. I want to really validate your experience if that's where you're at. And if it's something that helps keep you going, to think of, I want to know who I am. I want to see what happens. I want to see what this pain can open up inside of me, because when this pain comes up, it's here to free me. If I can feel this through and learn how to be with it by doing the exercises to get more capacity to be with this amount of pain, as that pain starts coming off of me, I can experience the truth of who I am underneath. Underneath is just like the most peaceful, blissful, still water. Right now, it might feel like just waves crashing or a whirlpool, typhoon. But once that's felt through, I promise you, underneath that, if you keep digging, you will hit treasure. You might need support, you might need guidance on how to do that. But underneath, the real you, that's what you're made of. Just this peace, this bliss, this stillness of mind, stillness of being, warmth, love, that's what you're made of. And if this can be incentive for you to keep working through the feelings, in addition to the practical circumstances in your life, keep feeling through what you're feeling, but do so with equanimity. Do so without judging it, trying to keep as much of a neutrality in your outlook as you're feeling the emotions. Don't judge your emotions. Don't judge how you feel about what's happening. Doesn't mean that you stay in abusive or bad situations. You can get out of those. but accept how you feel about them and feel that through. So when we don't want to be here, another thing to realize is that the one who doesn't want to be here is the ego. It's not you. So I want to just pause and see if that sinks in. You're the observer. You're the stillness I mentioned underneath the waves of the emotions, the waves of all the thoughts. Sense the silence in between my words right now. See if you can sense the silence in between your self-talk and your mind right now. This is you. The silence, the consciousness that is prior to the manifestation of thoughts, feelings, identities, identifications, thinking I am this kind of person or I'm that kind of person. No, the real you comes before all of that. And if you can turn inward and turn towards the source of this life force that's taking up this body, giving this body life. Because when I pass, my body is just going to stay here. But the essence of who I am is gone. What is that? That's who I am. Even now with this body, that's also who I am. And if we can put our focus here, this real you doesn't really mind being here. Now, again, I don't want to say this in any sort of invalidating way. I understand that this life could be so difficult that the mind has trouble reconciling all the things that it's going through. And I understand there are ways to unwind these things. There are ways to feel through traumas. But when you don't want to be here, it's the ego. It's the mind. So ego and mind are not exactly the same thing, but I'm going to use them interchangeably for the purpose of this video. So the ego is feeling like I can't win, I can't succeed. So I give up, I don't want to be here anymore. But this giving up could be the best thing that ever happened to you. I don't mean practically speaking, I don't mean give up on living. So we can give up our ego. We can give up the efforting, the striving, the trying. We can allow the ego to die. And that is allowing the body to live. When people take their life, they're taking the body as well in order to get the ego to die. Does that make sense? But you can have the ego die without taking the body. And I encourage you to really consider this because there's nothing to lose. There's everything to gain. It's really incredible to see what's beyond the ego. And your whole world can open up in a way that you never thought before. This could be the best thing that ever happened to you because you recognize that the ego can't do it. The futility of the ego to make me happy in life. You know, once I've gone so far to the extreme of suffering, and I can see that every thought in my mind, it's just like, it's not even helping. It's just like gibberish. And I can see that. I see, wow, it just goes on this program that's never helped me before, but I'm the one watching. If I can observe thoughts, so, you know, I can't observe thoughts visually, but I'll give you this example first. I can see my hand, so I can't be my hand, right? Because who's the one looking? God forbid I lose my hand. Am I still Nina? You know, how much needs to be gone for me to not be Nina anymore? If I'm looking at a tree, I can't be the tree, right? Who's the one looking? Similarly, thoughts, even though I can't look at them visually, I can still observe them in my mind. I can watch them. And they are physical objects. They're electrical impulses happening in my brain. And if I can observe them coming and going, I must be the watcher. They come and go, but I'm still here. Who's the one looking at them? So I have to come back to that. I'm the observer of all of this. I'm not the body. I'm not the mind. I'm not the emotions. The body has all new cells than it did just a year ago. The body looks extremely different than when it was a baby. The body's going to die. I can't be this body. Thoughts are always changing, coming and going. I can't be the contents of my mind. Emotions are coming and going. If I'm sad in this moment, does that make me a sad person? Or does that make me a person who's experiencing sadness in this moment? Who may experience anger in the next moment? And so I can't be my emotional state, it's just a state that comes and goes. Again, I'm still the one watching. What is this thread that's been the sense of I am, the sense of me? If it's not any of these things, we can't identify with these things. We can't hold on to these things to make ourselves happy. And so I have to see all the time, there's been an observer. There's been this sense of like, I'm still me. When I was 5 years old, my body looked different. I still felt like I was me. At this age, I still feel like there's a me. There's a sense of I am. And the intermediate sort of practice for this is to just observe that you're the witness to all this. I'm the one watching. So this is a witness level step to start with. And then later, there's more you can do around this, but you can't bypass this step. You want to start here. Start recognizing what you're not. Yeah, I'm not thoughts, I'm not body, I'm not feelings. Neti, right? Which means I'm not this, I'm not that. See all the things that you're not. So I'm not anything in my external world. I can't be anything I look at, because who's the one looking? And even in my internal world, I can still observe it. I can't be it. You see? So if you can start identifying with the real you, once you see it, once you experience it directly, you're going to see that the nature of your real self is self-fulfilling, which means it does not desire a thing outside of itself. It's just so happy just being, and your awareness of it, and you just feel that connection to yourself and to all that is, it's enough. You don't desire anything. You don't even mind being here on the planet. So many people who didn't want to be here, who found this freedom, and they don't mind being here now. I'm not going to say it's great all the time, but if you're really connected with your true self, not really that bad at all. Sometimes it is really great. So it's something to consider that if you're thinking of ending it, end the ego. Your body doesn't mind being here. It really doesn't. It's just the mind that is in so much pain. I understand there are some circumstances where people are probably in a lot of physical pain due to terminal illness and that sort of thing as well. But as far as mental suffering, psychological suffering, see if you can allow your ego to dissolve. And there are lots of ways to do this, but first recognizing who you are and recognizing what the ego is. And then taking your attention away from thinking or ego. Now, some thinking is just regular mind thinking. I got to make a left turn. I got to go to the bank. No problem. That's not ego. Ego is like, oh, I just can't do anything right. Right? Ego is when we make all these beliefs about ourselves, about our identity beliefs. Ego is the resistance, like, oh, why does that have to happen? Gosh, I just wish that wouldn't happen. So ego is this mind activity of resisting and identifying. And so when I turn my attention away from it, then I stop feeding it, because my attention is what feeds it. So I stop feeding it with my attention. And then I can turn this attention to my sense perceptions, to my visual field. I can look at things, but I mean, I can think and I can look at the same time, right? So why is that so great? Well, if I have an intention to lose interest in my thinking and then put 100% of my attention onto looking at every little texture of something, like I'm looking at art. Well, this is fantastic because I'm not feeding this at all. I'm not multitasking anymore. And I've lost interest, right? Each of these thoughts that's coming here, they're like, yeah, but how are you going to do this at work tomorrow? Oh, well, look at that thought. Look at that. It's like a telemarketer calling me, trying to sell me something I don't need. I was already at peace right now, not thinking, putting my attention on the visual field. And here comes this telemarketer, this thought. And if I follow it, I take the hook, or I take the bait, I get hooked. I follow it to the next thought and the next thought, and then I'm lost. I'm lost in thinking again, and I'm unhappy again because I'm identifying with thoughts. But if I see that first thought and I'm like, I've done this 1,000 times before. It's never brought me happiness, following thoughts, indulging in thoughts, believing in thoughts, thinking they're real, thinking they mean something about me. They don't. It's just the program. It's just stuff you've heard before. Mind is like a receiver. It just, receives whatever and it'll just pop up whenever. Doesn't mean anything about you. Don't buy in. So you're like, hey, telemarketer, no thank you. Take me off your list. And you come right back to the visual field. You can also do this with the auditory field, with hearing. That's my favorite one. So again, you have to lose interest in your thoughts, lose interest in even finishing the thought. Don't let it finish to the end, much less let it follow to the next thought, and put all of your attention by any means necessary to listening. I have a video on this I'm going to put here, but I'm basically talking about it right now. You can also do 50% of your attention on visual and 50% on auditory. This multitasking is okay because it's not thinking. This is just being on the sensory field. So the attention now, instead of being focused, it becomes diffuse, which is fantastic. Diffuse attention is one of the characteristics of being in non-dual awareness, which is very peaceful, very wonderful to be in. You can also put your attention on body sensations. In fact, you can do all three at the same time. 25% on visual, 25% of attention on auditory, 50% on body sensations, with equanimity, without judgment. You're really diffuse attention. It's quite wonderful. This is also non-dual. You're not focusing on thinking. The more you live like this, the ego just starts to dissolve. It's going to put up a fight. It's like, hey, look at me. It's going to have all these problems, all these, and then you don't fall for it. You just keep shifting attention from thinking back to sensory experiences. And so these are three of the senses that will, always be there for most people. Taste and smell, usually just when we're eating, but these are the three you'll always have with you. So when I'm putting my attention on thinking, what can minds do? Minds can judge and cause all sorts of suffering, identify. What can putting my attention on the visual field or the auditory field do? Nothing. There's no judgment whatsoever. It's just raw data, raw information. And then the mind takes it and then tries to interpret it, right? Like you can hear me speaking and you can understand my words because you understand English. If you didn't, I would just sound like, da, 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 da. Like it wouldn't make any sense, right? So think about that. The ears just take in the sounds, but your mind interprets these sounds I'm making into understanding the language. That's the difference. So in the visual field, I can look at something, but then my mind interprets, oh yeah, that is the letter H. That's the letter A. I'm reading something. But otherwise, it's just squiggles and lines. If I look at it without any sort of projection or projected meaning or interpretation that I've learned prior. Have you ever looked at a piece of art and for a moment it's like you just can't wrap your head around it, like the famous artwork with the staircases that are all, it doesn't match up. And so you can't just land on something and just call it something. So your mind goes into I just can't label it. And then you could go into being. Art has been called the highest form of communication because it has the power to just take you into being. So this is what I mean. You can go into sense perceptions, and there's no duality here in the sense of judgment. So that's why it's non-dual awareness. Whereas there's all this duality here, which is where suffering is. Comparison, wanting, desiring. So really consider, I urge you to consider that there are lots of ways to end suffering without ending the body. And so many people, actually, the best thing that happened to them was kind of feeling like they were at the end of their rope. And then that opened up for them so much. And I'm going to explain exactly what it is. It's that you don't have anything to lose. So you're willing to lay down the ego, to lay down the programming. Because if you have something to lose, it's very hard to do it. So it's really the lucky ones who are at the end of their rope. My teacher, actually, he says his favorite people to work with. Like he prefers to work with people who are at the end of their rope because they'll actually do it. They'll actually put down the ego. Because they see that happiness hasn't come from anywhere else before. So consider the blessing in this, being in this place right now, and how it can open up a whole different world. I remember for myself being in one of the worst moments of my life, and my teacher advising me to just interrupt thoughts exactly the way I just taught you. So you interrupt thought, don't let it finish. Turn your attention onto sensory perceptions. So I did it over and over and over. I kid you not, within an hour, I think it's actually within 20 minutes, but just to be safe, I'm going to say within an hour, I was in a completely different state of being. The thoughts were just causing my suffering. I was trying to become enlightened. You can't do that. You can't become enlightened. You have to just be here now. So that wanting to become had caused so much suffering. And so just being here now with the senses. And that contrast was so incredible for me. It was like pure suffering to a thunder of peace. It's an experience I will never forget. The contrast was so incredible that it was so obvious to me where suffering comes from. And it just comes from thinking the wrong things, identifying. And so practicing this thought interruption can get you out of the worst moments of your life. I can vouch for this. You just do it over and over and over, and you'll notice the more you do it, the quality of your thoughts will become lighter and lighter and lighter. So I'd love to hear if you tried this. I sincerely wish you peace. I know it's possible for you. There's so much hope that actually comes from being at the end of your rope. But just see if you can try to dissolve the ego before doing anything drastic. So please know that you are loved. And this love, I know a lot of people might be like, yeah, right. But I can guarantee it, even if you're not experiencing it from outside in the world, you are made of this love. And I've worked with thousands of people over the last decade, worked on myself thousands of times. And what happens when we clear what we are not identification with delusional thinking, identification with stuck emotions. When we clear that, what remains is always a sense of peace and love. You're literally made of it. You are so loved by yourself and the source of all that is. You are unable to even be separate from it. Your experience of it can be covered. But once you peel off what you're not and your identification with that, and once you stop putting your attention on that and you put the attention on what you are, the one watching, the silence between words and sounds, the love and peace underneath, the stillness underneath, interrupting the thoughts over and over until you experience it. You can experience this directly for yourself, and you don't need to believe me. You'll see it yourself. Okay, I wish you so much love and peace and grace. Okay, take care.